All right, everybody. It is the top of the hour, so let's go ahead and get started. My name is Bill McDowell. I'm COO here at Accelerant Research, and I am going to be our final presenter of the day in the Quarantine Virtual Insights Conference. Subject of my talk is going to be winning with online qualitative research, tips, tricks, and best practices for clients and suppliers. The gang here at Accelerant, we've done online qual for a number of years. And I wanted to kind of share some of the experiences that we've had in addition to, us all collectively being sort of thrust into, having very little options outside of online qualitative these days and under the current circumstances that we're in. Same reason we're doing this conference, virtually as opposed to in person. Qualitative research has had to shift substantially. If you want to get it done, chances are you're doing it virtually in some way, shape, or form. I'm going to go through really quick our ground rules just as a reminder for our presentation and the conference itself. We are at the mercy of tech. Zoom has been a pretty good platform. We're using it along with streaming in parallel on YouTube. So far so good. We've had a lot of luck with the tech. It hasn't crapped out on us, but should it happen, no problem. We are recording and we will post archive. I'm going to apologize if audio or video goes out, but it is what it is. Living in the current world that we are. Be respectful, no trolling. That mandate is more for our previous guest speakers. Because I'm the host, it's all right. You can be as mean to me as you wish. I'm cool with that. Network, engage, and interact. I definitely invite you to interact. Get into the Q&A, the chat. Share your own experiences. Tell me about what you've run into trying to do qualitative research virtually, especially this year, and what experiences you've had. I'm actually going to try to pull up the chat while we're speaking here, just so I don't miss anything. So I'm going to make this as interactive as possible. It's going to be a little on the dirty side in terms of just raw, a little bit more unrehearsed, off the cuff. That's kind of by design. What I'm planning to do is show you a bunch of examples, a bunch of potential techniques, tricks, hashtag qual hacks that you can employ yourself. And this is going to be sort of bouncing around from the angle of the participant, the moderator, the internal research stakeholder, the end user of the insights that are being shared. So trying to paint as holistic a picture as possible, come at it from a lot of different angles. But I have a tendency to bounce around. So like I say, get in the chat and share anything with me that you have questions about or that you want to learn more about. Let's see here. Sorry. I'm going to check my notes from time to time. I have sort of a rundown of the things I want to discuss today. But it's going to be kind of like your qualitative discussion guide, as it were, in that I may go off script. If anything else comes up, definitely, you guys stop me. Don't be shy. Don't be afraid. Like I said, I'm going to share a lot of different techniques, thoughts, and examples. But if you think that all of these should be applied to any one particular research study, I have to say you are out your damn mind, because it's a lot. Trying to incorporate all of this into any one study would be simply insanity. So this is really meant for example purposes. This is trying to get you thinking, right? I will say that I'm an ops guy, so I'm going to be coming at this from the angle, less of the back end analysis, less of the presentation of results, and more on the nuts and bolts, the methodologies, the logistics of getting qualitative research done. I think Ari, our previous speaker, did a fantastic job of kind of breaking down interview techniques, how to ask questions, pregnant pauses, all that wonderful stuff. And so what I'm going to focus on is more about, just the logistics of what it takes to sort of get you to the point where you can receive these insights, right? And I'm going to start with a couple of examples to sort of just, level set us. And first one I have is from I believe this was the February publication of the Grit Report, asking insights professionals what type of qualitative research they do regularly or occasionally. And if you look at the top 2 on this list, in-person focus groups, in-person IDIs, I have to assume that in-person IDIs also would include like in-home or job site ethnographies, as well as in-facility IDIs. Wow. So, we've got what? Pushing 2/3 using focus groups regularly. And I know we see, there's a lot of conversation these days. You look at a lot of the quirks and green books and publications out there that, that talk about, a lot of the types of research methods that are on the cutting edge. But, for many and most in this industry, sitting down in a focus group facility is still a big thing, or was, up until February, March of this year. So, wow. I mean, we've we've had to have an enormous shift, right? I'm actually going to show you one more example real quick. I'm going to just, let's see, I'm going to stop sharing for just a moment. And I am going to, without getting you seasick, hopefully, I'm going to pan my webcam to show you that I am sitting in a focus group facility in Charlotte, North Carolina. There's proof right there. I've got my one-way glass right there. And guess what? This focus group facility is being used for a webinar and not actual focus groups, because there's this pandemic thing you guys may have heard of. We've stopped hosting in-person focus groups as of, gosh, yeah, I guess it was around March, and really, no end in sight there. Not, and I've definitely seen some facilities that are beginning to reopen, but we're not there yet. To be honest, we're sticking with online. And the whole point of this, this talk today is to hopefully, if you are among, these big groups up here that have always done in person, or if that has, been the majority of the research that you've done, that's what we're here to talk about. So those were my 2 examples. And I don't know if you noticed, but when you saw me in that mirror, I am 100% wearing gym shorts and sneakers right now, because I'm just shoulders up for the webinar. I think the current state of things, when it comes to corporations just being, effectively travel banned, nobody's going into the office, nobody is, certainly sending their employees out for travel, even as different, localities in the country start to open back up, the chances of actually traveling to a given market and conducting in-person research, at least for the foreseeable future, there's not a lot of that that's going to be happening. But what is happening, and I think early in the year, there was sort of a frantic shift, as things started to shut down. We had a very big initial push for any in-person research that was happening needed to quickly go online. But then from there, we've definitely seen a fair amount of research being conducted online. But I think there's also been, especially for the summer months, a lot of wait and see, sort of waiting for the storm to pass. And, it's becoming increasingly apparent that, at least the conditions as they are right now, likely through the end of this year and probably well into 2021, in one way, shape, or form are still going to be here. So, we all, as suppliers, as corporate researchers, as academics, agency workers, you name it, we are all essentially serving organizations, and the show must go on. Insights needs are there, and information needs to be captured, and we've got to figure out ways to get at that. So I'm going to attempt to take these these first few different methods, types of research, and kind of share ways that we can pivot. If you're used to doing it this way, maybe these are things that you consider. If you've been doing it already, like I said, just share. Let us know what you've been up to, right? Because I think we're, like I said, we're all serving different organizations. I think a lot of times we tend to get into these sort of pigeonhole patterns as researchers. When objectives come down the pike and they are in this form, we do this type of research. A lot of times it is, just by default focus groups, or by default in-home ethnographies. When those kind of go-to methods are taken off the table, it's scary, but it almost presents to us, a little bit of an exciting time as researchers, because, we can kind of go to this sort of clean slate place and focus on, okay, here are the objectives. And this is what researchers do in general. Anytime you're given objectives and design a research study, you think about, what are the conditions I'm existing within? What's my budget? What does my timing look like? What are the internal uses of the information that I'm going to be providing? Based on the answers to those questions, you design a research study. Now you've got new factors on top of budget, on top of timing. Now you've got restrictions in terms of even how you can go about doing that research. So it's a time when we can actually be a little bit on the creative side, which is kind of cool, right? So I'm going to go through several methods and examples. And this is online qual. A lot is going to be webcam based, just like we're doing right now. I'm on a Zoom cam. Everyone and their cousin has been using these types of web meetings for the past several months. If you hadn't been using them before pandemic, you certainly aren't now. It's very similar to how research can be conducted with participants, right? And I'm going to start at the top of the list of the GRIT report that we were looking at, and focus groups. Were you to take in-person focus groups and do them online? Well, it's these webcam-based, multiple screens, just like the Zoom meetings that everybody is taking part in. I'm obviously being sarcastic here with showing the Brady Bunch as the example, but it's this is what I refer to these interviews as. You've got lots of panels and lots of people talking to one another and looking at one another, led by moderator. I think the larger the groups get, you've got 6-8 people in an in-person focus group. It's easier to keep track of and to, kind of wrangle the crowd, as it were. You've got 6-8 people in a webcam group. And I'm sure we've all been on Zoom meetings of late. The more bodies you start to get into it, the more little windows, the more opportunity for for background noise, for distractions, for multitasking, for people that just aren't able to pay attention quite as well. That is an area when it comes to in-person research that we miss. Is the interaction. Being in the same room, the energy is at times difficult to recapture virtually. My recommendation for this tends to be smaller groups. So if in person, you default to the 6 to 8 person focus group. I would highly recommend considering the dyads or the triads for webcam based focus groups. The smaller groups tend to be a little more intimate, and there aren't as many cats to herd, as it were. But it almost sort of begs the question, and this is one that we'll ask a lot of times, is a group discussion even appropriate, or is it better to be doing one-on-one research? I think for a long time the default has been in-person focus groups, and a lot of that had to do with just efficiency's sake. You really do have to ask the question, especially now that we're being pushed online. Is it appropriate to be doing the larger group or even multiple participants, or can you default back to the one-on-one interview? And I'm going to kind of share an example of the one-on-one interview. So we've got different ways. You've got in-person, in-home ethnographies, right? That's kind of a tried and true way of conducting qualitative. Again, that you go back to that grit report slide, and that is the in-person one-on-ones. It's one of the top types of research that's getting done. Can't do that right now, but what you can do is what we like to lovingly refer to as the show and tell ethnography. So actually having participants, and I'm going to bring in a participant, at least attempt to. So Krista is going to join me. There she is. So Krista is a team member of mine, but she's also a mom, and you can see strewn in the background there are a bunch of toys of her daughter Journey's, and Journey is somewhere. But guess what? Kids, for whatever reason, they just, they're not the most cooperative participants. I would actually argue that this sort of show and tell method of research, especially when you're doing research among kids, but just about any product category, can be done in many cases even better using webcam. And I think this is a fairly new phenomenon. I'd say probably a few years ago, online qual, webcam-based qual, not so much. Hey, Mike. That was great. Yeah, years ago, it was like talking to someone on the space shuttle, right? You had the very choppy audio and video feed. It was difficult to pull, to pull off. That's not the case anymore. People, especially since pandemic has come into play, people are just comfortable sharing online. Everybody and their grandparents literally are on FaceTime or on Skype. You've got Zoom family reunions happening left and right. People are very comfortable sharing via this method. So why not, as researchers, take advantage of that? So no longer do we have to send the ethnography crew out to them. We can actually just essentially, pop the webcam on and let the participant do their thing in terms of, talking with us, yes, going through a guided discussion, but also showing us, the product categories that they're using, showing the things that they do on a regular basis. Good job, Krista.
She's in the back riding on her scooter around the house. So.
Things are important. Yeah, so if I'm doing scooter, research and I want to have a product tester, well, guess what? Journey is, she's a great candidate. And if you ever do kids research in facility, putting them at home in their natural habitat makes them a little more comfortable. They don't have this weird, research crew breathing down the neck and, and distracting them. They can sort of, just do. All right, Krista. Good job. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Bye. Bye, everyone.
So, the next one on I think it was the next on the list on that grit report rundown was telephone IDIs. That was actually something that surprised me a lot. I know we still do them a lot. They're great, especially in B2B setting. But I didn't realize how widely used they still were, especially now, within pandemic, with everyone, in just about every corporation you can imagine getting their Zoom on, as it were. I would make a strong argument in many cases against the audio only or the telephone based IDI, and moving it into a web meeting platform like a Zoom, for example. And even if there are reasons, that sometimes, especially with B2B research, you've got sensitive information, you've got, folks that for one reason or another shouldn't be sharing screen or showing their webcam. Even leveraging the audio only function in a Zoom, in a GoToMeeting, in a Microsoft Teams, you can have some of these, observer functions like the chat, like, some of the Q&A. A lot of these programs have automatic transcription, voice to text. You can actually conduct phone-based research just using these very same platforms. So a little sidebar there. The next one we're going to go through is shop-alongs. So retail, sending someone off to a retail or meeting them at the front of the grocery store and asking, them to go on a shop-along interview, being, tailed by the camera crew. That's a very popular bit of research, but now that COVID's taken hold of everything, that's going to be a lot more difficult logistically to pull off. I'm going to ask Erica to be our simulated shopper. And
Hi.
Erica is outside, so she's not in a retail store, but you get the picture. So Erica's on her smartphone. She is hanging out outside. It looks like a very pretty day, so that's a good thing. Yeah. All right, so Erica is at retail, right? You have a shopping task for her to do. Maybe as moderator, you are in her ear, speaking with her in real time. Maybe this is something that she's capturing as a homework assignment prior to maybe a sit-down interview. But she has the ability, using her smartphone, to walk through the store, to go and capture and sort of talk through everything. And I'm seeing in the chat, David has a really good contribution. GoPros, really good for ethnographic interviews. Same way, and I'll talk about it in a minute. But one of the drawbacks of what Erica is doing right now is the fact that at least one of her hands is occupied, right? So Erica, mind flipping your camera around?
Sure.
All right. So again, Erica is, wow, that's a really good looking back porch.
I'm at my parents' house, so I can't take credit, but.
Oh, please do. Come on. I'm jealous. No, but in retail, we can ask her to toggle back and forth, pretending I'm your moderator and Erica is the participant. All of our attendees of this webinar are the client observers who are just watching behind the glass, without the M&Ms or with M&Ms, and sort of taking it in, right? You may ask Erica to, if she is in the retail store, go on a shopping exercise, go to a certain aisle, just as we do when we're doing this, side by side with, again, the camera crew following her along. Yeah, so all kinds of possibilities and leveraging a lot of these platforms that are in existence right now, right? I think one thing that we often do, and even you can have folks go through the checkout process. There are certain rules and sensitivities around recording staff members at stores is definitely still the types of things that you want to make sure you're speaking with your client about, thinking about it and talking about. But often we'll do a shopping exercise, Erica using her smartphone again, and then maybe she makes a purchase, and then we'll do a debrief interview, maybe even in the parking lot in the car, asking her to show us what she's purchased or talk about some of the things that she has. All kinds of different possibilities, right? All right, Erica, well done. And I like the walking around, simulating shopping. I wish you
Yeah,
had.
I really tried to bring it to life there for you.
Oh, that was fantastic. Really, really good stuff. All right, thank you, man.
Thanks, Bill.
Okay. So we talked about the shop along interview. Something that Ari mentioned in the last interview is body language. And if you're not careful, if, for example, if I am a research participant and you're only seeing me shoulders up, there may be things that we're missing. It's not, you don't have to do, and I hope Erica was a good example, but you don't have to be, just someone sitting at the kitchen table, from the shoulders up. You can, get them on their wireless headphones, have them walking around the room and narrating and speaking with you. You try to get as creative as possible. Again, you're thinking about what the objectives are, and then figuring out what types of exercises, what types of things we should be asking of people. So we can also get into like product testing. There's a biggie, right? With your typical in-person research, a product test, or asking someone to evaluate something. That's pretty easy, right? You ship enough of the product to the facility, you have respondents unwrap it, hold the package, look at it, talk about it. Obviously, that's a much more difficult thing to pull off right now. If you're doing this remotely, can that still be done? And the answer is yes, but there are certainly considerations and things that you have to take into account. You can very easily, during recruitment, ship product to participants. If it's a product that is in more like prototype form, if it is subject to actually being shipped. If it's something that already exists on store shelves, well, then I would argue that the exercise that Erica just went through, the shop along, works great as a homework assignment, a task to send people out, prior to their scheduled sit-down webcam interview, have them go on a shopping task, go purchase the thing that we're asking of them. We'll work that into their incentive and compensation on the back end, or prior to, depending on the expense of the product. Again, sometimes it's prototypes that don't already exist, and you can ship them. Other times it may be actually just exposing concepts. There is that. We do a lot of what we like to refer to as, and this is not something that we made up at Accelerant Research, unboxing interviews. This is something that kids on YouTube and makeup influencers have been doing for quite some time. They go out, they go shopping, they bring their stuff home, and they unbox. Bazillions of subscribers in the world of social media love to see this stuff. Unboxing is a really neat technique that can be used in research as well and on camera. So, you know, I've got my box, you know, I was sent this product to evaluate, right? Things to be thinking about though, you know, during the objective rundown and figuring out what assignments are for participants. You know, if I have been sent this product and, you know, the objective of the research is get my initial reaction to it, you know, I need to be given an instruction during recruitment that I'm supposed to receive but not open. Maybe it's a prototype that I do need to open, make sure all component parts are there, so that, you know, come showtime when the interview is happening, when, you know, executive stakeholders are you know, watching the live stream, that I actually can use the thing that I've been sent. So, you know, depending on your objectives, the method for, or the instructions around the unboxing piece can differ quite a bit. Also, you know, if it's one of these stupid plastic packages that takes, you know, a lot of hardware and tools to even get into, is that a worthwhile use of the interview time? So Ari was talking about, you know, one-on-one sit-down interview, half hour is a good sweet spot, and I couldn't agree more. Do I want to spend, you know, 15 minutes of that half hour waiting for my participant to go to the kitchen junk drawer, find the scissors and knife, try to cut into this thing, and, you know, only then start using the product? If part of the research is to assess, you know, customer experience with regard to the packaging, to, you know, getting into it, to, you know, the surprise that happens once they do open, yeah, cool. If that is something that is not what this is about, this is about maybe, you know, testing the thing within the package, then maybe you want to have them do that prior, right? I'll open it up, don't mess with it, then we'll talk. And participants are usually very good, so long as you spell these kind of things out during recruitment. These are things that we have to think about, that when you're doing focus groups in person, you don't, right? So, you know, kind of keeping on the whole experience, you know, customer experience, user experience kind of theme, you know, maybe it's something a little more complex. Maybe I'm going to try to, so maybe we can leverage screen sharing, right? So, you know, just as when I pull up a PowerPoint presentation in this webinar, I can ask a participant to pull up, you know, and screen share whatever it is that we're doing. Maybe it's an evaluation of the social media sites that they like to visit, you know, when it comes to dealing with whatever product category we're talking about. Maybe it's, you know, walking, we talked about the in-person, you know, the in-store shop along. Well, so much shopping is happening virtually these days. Maybe it's, you know, pull up the smartphone screen and have participants actually, you know, sort of walk through. And I'm going to attempt to pull my screen up real quick. Okay, so fun feature in Zoom is the ability to mirror a smartphone. This was not done on purpose, but I should say that it is, because, you know, part of my, you know, later presentation is, you know, about the shit that happens, you know, with just about any qual study. But, you know, as you start to layer these complexities on, especially when dealing with tech, you know, stuff happens, right? So I practice at home. We've been working remotely, doing my screen sharing, but I made the mistake of, you know, not passing my firewall here in Accelerant Office. And so I've got a smartphone that isn't mirroring properly. Oops, that's something that needs to be checked out beforehand. So I'm going to skip that piece, but there is a very cool feature within Zoom, within a lot of, you know, just web meeting platforms, where you can actually mirror phone screen, if it's doing usability testing, if it's, all different types of research. But what I am going to do, I'm going to stick with my phone here. I'm going to, let's say there is a more complex product that a participant is being asked to evaluate. I'm going to go to Zoom. And I'm going to come in as a second participant.
So here is
mute myself. Somebody mind giving me a quick just update in the chat whether they're hearing a lot of background noise? Okay, cool. Thank you, Dave. All right, so here's an example of product evaluation. Let's say that I'm being asked to set up a new voice over IP phone system in my office. It's getting kind of weird with this two angles. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip my screen. And something that usability labs do a really good job of, there we go, is you'll have behind the glass observers watching, but then you'll also have kind of a close-up of the thing that they're interacting with. You can kind of simulate the same thing by asking a participant to, using their smartphone, come in and be basically two people at one time almost, right? So I'm participant and I'm sharing my webcam and telling you about the experiences that I'm having, while simultaneously I am attempting to set up my new Polycom phone, which is not plugged in, but it's okay. Let me pull this down. And let's say that a third element to this research is that I, as a participant, am having trouble going through this usability process and setting up. Well, what I can do is I, as a participant, can be sharing my screen, right? So now I'm online, I'm on Polycom's website, downloading their user manual, and I'm sharing with the moderator, still my webcam, as well as my other webcam, as well as the screen for the experience that I'm going through. A lot of different possibilities there. All right. I'm going to stop that process. And sharing again, back to the PowerPoint presentation. Yeah, so there's a lot going on with that, sharing of multiple, right? And my favorite, Spaceballs GIF. You find too many different camera angles and it gets a little like you're falling into the matrix. So lots of possibilities, right? And if all else fails, there is still the in-person option. It's just right now much tougher to pull off. I've seen a lot of communication from focus group facilities around the country, that are implementing all kinds of different ways to help and to start, allowing folks to get back to in-person research to the extent possible. Like I said, here at Accelerant, we've kind of elected not to do some of those things. Setting up the hockey penalty box, plexiglass, partitions between participants. The thing that we are entertaining, at least at this point, is, when absolutely necessary, doing one-on-one research in facility, but even that I kind of strongly cautioning against. And the reason for that is just, thinking about the participant experience, thinking about, the ultimate goal of, trying to provide as much insights as possible, right? With any research study, under the conditions that you're facing. A big part of that, if you have folks who are right now just, uncomfortable going places, bringing them into a facility, unless absolutely necessary, is going to, it's going to mess with, ability to participate. It's going to mess with the ability to share really good insights in many cases. And that's what we're trying to avoid, right? But in person is still, it's still doable, but, you have to take great care, be very careful, as it were. So platform selection is something that, I find all too often is decided upon before the research objectives are put on paper. And I think, we tend to kind of make a mistake in doing so. We have a subscription to this platform. So, we're just automatically going to go that route for a bit of research. In many cases, absolutely appropriate and should be done. But my recommendation is always to take a step back and make sure that, you're using the mix of platforms to facilitate the insights as best you can, as opposed to sort of being painted into a corner to the extent possible. I will say that when it comes to selecting research platforms for conducting online qual, in clients, heavy recommendation to very early on get with IT, and especially if you haven't been doing online qual, get with IT, make sure that whatever platform that you're using, that IT has blessed it, that it's been whitelisted, that there's not going to be corporate firewall blockers in place to where the very people who should be sitting down and observing this research are not able to. That's horrible. And I've seen it happen before. Design this great bit of research, recruits are going out, as a lot of times when you're dealing with in person, it's kind of an afterthought that, yeah, you got to share, the information and address for the Phoenix facility because we got to plug it into our GPS, but that's not something that happens until, a day or two before the research goes live. With online qual, if you've done so, you could find yourself day before showtime not being able to allow half of the observers to view the research, and that's not a fun place to be. Which is why I am actually a huge fan of, just like we're using right now, Zoom or WebEx, GoToMeeting, Microsoft Teams. These web meeting platforms are really good for conducting research, and each has its own, set of pros and cons. But all of them, especially now, they tend to be already vetted by IT internally, and they're easy to pull off. Most folks have them already installed, so it's a huge first step. And they're also just ubiquitous. They are everywhere. But what I'm a real big fan of is, going back to my first slide, that grit report rundown. I think we've always, as researchers, especially, when you're kind of trained for the in-person, we think of one option. I've got a study. These are my objectives. It's qual, and it's going to be focus groups, or it's going to be in-homes. Now, and those interviews are going to last 90 minutes, and I'm going to have these people, these respondents, sit down. I've got that amount of time to squeeze as much information out of them as possible. Now that may not necessarily be the case. I'm a huge fan of mixing and matching platforms. So, do a webcam interview like we are right now, like some of these examples I'm going through, but incorporate, different methods, different platforms. And I'll show you a couple of examples of that. Let me stop sharing and take you over to my web browser. Okay, so picture, if you will, you've got a webcam interview going on. You've got, everyone sitting, all of your participants sitting at a computer. Let's leverage that. Think about when you're in-person focus groups and you're, passing around the sheet of paper with the concept for people to make note on or mark up. And you, moderator, you gather those at the end of the day. You take them home in a huge folder and you tally up results. Obviously, it's not for quantitative assessment, but you're going to report back on that. You're going to code, as Ari was mentioning in his last presentation. That's what you do when you're analyzing these results. Everybody and their cousin has a Qualtrics account or some type of online survey programming platform that they use. Why not incorporate some of that into your qual research? Asking participants to answer some of those closed-ended type questions. And this is no different than if you're doing an ad test or a concept test. You're going to ask your participants to rate on a scale. It's not necessarily, again, used for projective reasons, but it is to get a sense for, what they think and to get them, at least committed to the extent to which they like it, so that they can then start, describing in more detail. You can get into lots of different exercises using existing platforms like quant research survey tools. Think about something like a dial testing bit of research that maybe you've always done it in person using the handheld dials, and that is just off the table right now. Well, you could essentially get at the same type of thing using online dial tests. Obviously, if there are norms that you have been using with the handheld dials, it's not going to be a one-to-one with online slider dials. But if, for example, you're comparing a couple of McDonald's ads, that you're considering rolling out there, if it's all about the comparison between them, you're still getting some really good insights, rather than that's the way we've always done it. We can't do it that way now, so we can't do any research. The idea here is to be able to at least get at some options, get to as much insight as you possibly can under the circumstances. It's true with every single research study that you're going to be involved with. Using bulletin board methodologies, just as a standalone, I think they're great. So asynchronous methods, right? So as opposed to the one-on-one, webcam-based interview, doing bulletin board research. But you can also incorporate these types of platforms into these webcam interviews. Again, I'm going to use the example of, you pass out the new print ad to your participants sitting around the table in the focus group, and you ask them to, take out their pen and circle the things that they like, put an X through the things that they don't like. Why not go through the exact same exercise, do so virtually? For example, here I am. So this is actually a platform that Accelerate has developed. It's called Blognog, blogging meets ethnography. It's a bulletin board platform. As co-branding, would have it. We're actually about to roll out a new version of it. This is a sneak preview, but I had to slide in that little plug right there. But no, I mean, any platform. If you're using, whatever kinds of, online projective exercises are available out there. For example, looking at this Coke ad, I am being asked to circle the things that I like and comment about them. The really cool thing about this is, again, rather than, that big stack of completed or, scratched through paper versions of this print ad, I have, a heat map on the back end that's going to aggregate these results. Again, it's not quant per se, but it does, make for a nice addition to your research report, being able to summarize and toss out a heat map as well. Even the Zooms, user testing platforms of the world, they can be fantastic for looking at online usability, going through exercises, recording screens, actually asking a participant to take part in an exercise like that while they're sharing within a Zoom meeting. You can sort of be over the shoulder as they're going through it. It can be really fascinating. And then even getting into, let me check my time. I've got only a few minutes left. I tend to ramble, apologies. Neuro research. There's, let's see, let me stop sharing this. Sorry. A lot of different possibilities for even doing neuro or bio research. Webcam archive video works fantastically for popping into facial coding software and getting at the sentiment analysis that goes with. ECG built into the Apple Watch while asking a participant to view a television spot, for example, and watch what the heart rate does. These are alternatives to the in-person putting the shower cap on and looking at some of these biometrics, but it is an alternative. You don't have to necessarily just not do the research because you can't do it in person right now. Webcam-based eye tracking, for example. There's some really good platforms out there that allow just using the webcam that everyone has in their computer to do some eye tracking type of research. So keeping us all honest when it comes to time, and if questions are coming through, I'm going to apologize because I am starting to bump up against the end of the hours, but definitely ask questions, submit. I'll flash my contact info at the end of this. Feel free to reach out with questions or with any issues or ideas or even thoughts. But I will say, from the standpoint of the client, observer, and end user, I would say that these folks, this is arguably one of the biggest losses from not being able to do in-person research. And it's kind of the magic that can happen in the observation room. Having the team or all the stakeholders together at once in the same room, and sequestered and thinking about this and the subject matter as they're seeing it in front of them. A lot of idea generation, of debriefing, of inspiration can happen during that time. We lose out on that with online qual. Just about any web meeting platform is going to have the ability to, to observe, to watch from behind the virtual glass, as it were. But there is the temptation or the tendency to multitask. Just as I'm sure some of you right now are, my window is minimized on the second screen and you're sort of glancing in every once in a while. It's okay, it is what it is. When you really have stakeholders internally who need to be paying attention to research, it makes it tougher. There are alternatives to doing that. I'm actually one that I really love, and there are some apps out there that can be great for this. But so my daughter, my teenage daughter, does during quarantine a lot of Netflix watching parties. So there are basically apps out there where you can log into Netflix, together, watch together as if you're in the same room, but you're doing so virtually and chatting with one another and giggling as it goes. The same can be true of in clients. You can set up, on the one monitor, watching the Zoom interview that's happening. On the second monitor, have, a Slack conversation that's going on, or, Microsoft Teams, or a Zoom within a Zoom, where you can be interacting with one another and talking with one another. The fantastic thing about webcam based or online is that video is going to be captured automatically, and what that means is the ability to go back and potentially watch after the fact. I think you definitely still want to assign roles within the organization. There should always be someone internally who is watching all of the interviews live as they are happening. But as you go further up the chain in the organization, that becomes less and less possible, right? The higher level execs, they can't, and the same thing is true with in-person. Maybe they can only make the flight to one market and sit in for one or two groups. As an alternative with online qual, what you can do is set up playlists, or sort of the binge watching. We did 30 interviews over the course of the past 3 days. Here are the 3 or 4 that you really need to sit down and watch. Knock them out while you're on the treadmill. I'm also a big fan of the sizzle reel as a deliverable on the back end. Again, taking that massive amounts of data and cutting it down to the highlights, right? I'm doing it on time, almost there. So last thing I'm going to talk about, and I'll do this really quickly, is participant recruitment. This is going to make or break your online qual study, and you have to be thinking about what it is that you're going to be asking of these folks. Participants are great, to the extent that you tell them you're going to be asked to dedicate, X amount of time of your life, and we are going to incent you. Why? They'll do, whatever it is that you ask of them within those parameters. But if, part of the research is making sure that they download a new web tool, a new app, and it takes them, an hour and a half with tech support to do that, that's not a good thing necessarily. So, making sure that the participant, we call this a tech check. So whatever it is that they're being asked to do, making sure that they are able to do it before the interview goes live. The last thing that you want is an interview to be happening in real time, and high-level execs are observing, and all you're doing is watching a participant try to figure out how to get their microphone to work. That could have been taken care of during recruitment in a 5-minute process. And I think I am just about out of time. I definitely have a tendency to ramble, but let me put my info up here. Definitely reach out to me if you have questions. If there's anything that you'd like to discuss further, I'll definitely be here. And I really do want to thank our other presenters today. We are bumping up right against the end here. Quick announcement that we will be doing sessions just like these in both September and October. So, be on the lookout for communications for those. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. Stay safe and happy qualing.